there is a man who built one of the most widely used features on the internet. He did not build it to harm anyone. He built it in an afternoon. He was 29 years old. He was trying to make scrolling easier. His name is Aza Raskin, and the feature he built is Infinite Scroll. Researchers at the Center for Humane Technology, the organization Raskin later helped found, estimate that Infinite Scroll alone drains hundreds of thousands of hours of focused human attention, every single day. Raskin described what he had built in these terms. It was, he said, like sprinkling behavioral cocaine onto an interface. That was not a boast. That was a confession. Most people frame attention as a personal discipline problem. You scroll too much because you lack willpower. You get distracted because you are weak. You cannot focus because you were not born focused. This framing is wrong, and it is costing you more than your time. What the research shows, and what the industry understood long before you did, is that your attention is not a character flaw waiting to be fixed. It is a resource, a measurable, finite, economically valuable resource. And for the last 15 years, the most sophisticated engineering teams on the planet have been systematically extracting it. Not because they are villains, because it is worth money. Your attention, when aggregated with 3 billion others, is the foundation of the largest advertising market in human history. The question this episode asks is simple. If your attention is worth that much to them, what is it worth to you? To understand what is actually happening inside your brain, we need to talk about dopamine. Not in the pop science way, not as a happiness chemical. In 2001, neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz at the University of Cambridge published research that fundamentally changed how we understand motivation. His work, later cited in over 12,000 academic papers, demonstrated that dopamine is not released when you receive a reward. It is released in anticipation of a reward you cannot predict. The variable reward, the unknown outcome, the slot machine, not the paycheck. This is not a metaphor. The mechanics are identical. Every notification, every like, every scroll that might or might not show you something interesting, these are not accidents of design. They are engineered uncertainty. And engineered uncertainty triggers the same dopamine system responsible for motivation, learning, and financial decision-making. The same circuits your brain uses to evaluate whether to save money or spend it, whether to invest now or wait, whether to build something long-term or take the reward today. When that system is chronically overloaded, the capacity for slow, deliberate financial thinking does not decline gradually. It gets structurally crowded out. Her name is Sarah. She is 31 years old. She earns $78,000 a year in Columbus, Ohio. She is not irresponsible. She reads articles about investing. Her employer offers a 4% 401k match. She enrolled. She never logged back in to increase her contribution. Free money. Sitting there. Every pay period. Unclaimed. Not because she forgot, not because she is lazy, because the 20 minutes required to log in, navigate the portal, and make a decision that produces zero immediate feedback, that task loses every single time to the device that promises a response in seconds. She checks her phone nearly 200 times per day. That is the current American average, according to recent device usage surveys. She is not addicted. She is calibrated. Her nervous system has been tuned, gradually, invisibly, to expect a reward cycle measured in seconds. Investing operates on a cycle measured in decades. These two systems are not compatible. Not because she is weak, because one of them was professionally engineered to override the other. And her phone is not even demanding her attention right now. It is just sitting on the kitchen counter. Which brings us to the real problem. In 2017, researchers at the University of Texas at Austin published a study in the Journal of the Association for Consumer Research. Led by Adrian Ward, the study found something that should have generated far more attention than it did. Participants who placed their smartphones on the desk, face down, silent, no notifications, performed significantly worse on cognitive capacity tests than participants whose phones were in another room entirely. The phone did not ring, it did not light up, it did not need to be touched. Its physical presence was enough. The researchers called it a brain drain, a measurable fraction of cognitive capacity permanently reserved, not for a task, not for a person, not for a problem, for a device sitting silently on a desk. The findings come from controlled, peer-reviewed research, replicated, and largely overlooked. Hold that finding for a moment, because the implications are not small. Wealth building is not about finding the right investment. It is not about a secret the wealthy are hiding. It is, at its core, a cognitive task. It requires the ability to sit with discomfort and not act. To evaluate a long horizon without needing immediate confirmation. To resist the pull of today in favor of a return you will not feel for years. These are not moral qualities. They are neurological functions. And they depend on the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most sensitive to dopamine overload. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine found that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully rebuild deep focus after a single interruption. The average knowledge worker self-interrupts every 3 to 5 minutes. Do the math. The cognitive state required to compare a Roth IRA to a traditional 401k, to review a compound interest projection, to resist an impulse purchase with actual numbers in front of you, that state is not degraded. It is structurally prevented. For most people, on most days, without them ever noticing it. Here is the line the productivity industry does not say out loud. The attention economy does not need you to fail. It does not need you to go broke. It does not need you to make catastrophically bad decisions. It only needs you to stay distracted long enough that you never quite get around to making good ones. That is the real cost. Not a bad investment, the investment you never started. In America, the average working adult carries $6,500 in credit card debt at an interest rate above 20%. According to the Federal Reserve, the median American holds less than $5,000 in liquid, accessible savings outside of retirement accounts and home equity. These are not the outcomes of bad decisions. They are the outcomes of deferred decisions. Decisions that never quite rose above the noise. Sarah's missed 401k match alone, 4% of her salary, uncaptured over 10 years, represents over $30,000 in employer contributions left on the table. and that is assuming her salary never increases, which it likely will, making the real number even higher. That is before a single dollar of investment return. That is just the match. That is just the free money. Gone. Not because of a market crash, not because of a bad fund, because she never got around to logging back in. She thought the problem was discipline. It was really design. The system that profits from your attention understands something financial education largely ignores. Wealth in America is not a knowledge gap, it is an execution gap. And execution requires a cognitive environment that the attention economy is structurally incentivized to destroy. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances shows that wealth inequality has widened in every decade since the smartphone became the primary screen in American life. The platforms are not neutral infrastructure. You pay for them with the neurological capacity required to build anything that takes longer than a news cycle to return a result. And here is the deeper irony. Former insiders, product designers, early executives, the people who built and shipped the features now embedded in 3 billion lives. Many of them have walked away from those same systems. Justin Rosenstein, who co-invented the like button, has spoken publicly about removing social media from his own life entirely. Sean Parker, Facebook's founding president, openly admitted the platform was built to consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible, and said those conversations now make him uncomfortable. Tristan Harris spent years working inside Google on the ethics of design, left, and has dedicated the years since to warning governments about the systems he observed being built from the inside. These are not outsiders speculating. These are people who were in the room, and they stepped away. There is a version of that sentence that should make you stop and sit with its implication for a long moment. So what does the evidence actually point toward? Not a digital detox, not a productivity journal, not willpower. 3 structural moves drawn from the research, not from self-help. First, change the environment before the decision, not during it. The Ward study showed that willpower applied in the moment of temptation is already too late. The cognitive tax is paid the moment the device enters the room. This means treating your financial thinking as a protected physical context. Leave the phone in another room. Not sometimes. Every single time you sit down to think about money. Put it in the kitchen. Lock it in a drawer. The research does not care about your motivation. It cares about your proximity. Second, deliberately lengthen your reward cycle. The dopamine system recalibrates. It is not fixed. Extended exposure to slower feedback, reading a chapter, reviewing a portfolio quarterly, contributing to a 401k you do not check daily, gradually recalibrates what your nervous system expects. That discomfort in the early weeks is not weakness. It is recalibration. What feels intolerable in week 1 becomes normal in week 8. The capacity for patience is trainable. The research on delayed gratification consistently shows this. It is not inherited. Third, separate the information environment from the reward environment. The same device used for social media and entertainment is the same device used for banking, investment platforms, and financial research. A separate browser profile used only for finance. A dedicated device with 0 social apps installed. The neurological state you bring to a money decision is not the same state that existed 20 minutes of scrolling ago. Not subjectively, not measurably. The structural move is simple. Different tools, different contexts, different states. Remember Aza Raskin. He built Infinite Scroll in an afternoon. He did not intend harm. He has since spent years in front of governments, regulators, and anyone willing to listen, arguing that the systems he helped build require structural accountability, not just individual restraint. He asks a specific question. If a pharmaceutical company released a drug that measurably impaired prefrontal function in 3 billion people, we would call it a public health crisis. We would regulate it. We would, at minimum, have the conversation seriously. We are not having the conversation. Because the product is free. Because the damage is invisible. Because the mechanism is indistinguishable from entertainment. And because the people most affected, the people missing their 401k match, carrying a credit card balance they meant to pay off 3 years ago, putting off the investment account they opened and never funded, have no clear sense of why the gap between knowing and doing is so wide. Now they do. The attention trap is not about screen time. It is about what screen time systematically takes from you. Not your hours, but the cognitive architecture those hours were supposed to build. The systems that create long-term wealth require exactly the neurological functions that the attention economy is most incentivized to erode. That is not a conspiracy. It is a business model. Understanding the mechanism is the first form of power. In the next episode, we examine a different trap, one that promised an entire generation that more education was the answer to economic uncertainty. The Federal Reserve data now makes clear it was not. And the cost of that broken promise for millions of Americans carrying student debt they were told was an investment is only now becoming fully visible.